This video is on how to take care of residential starter at your home. What I'm using as an example for this video is our starter at the bakery. We went through a lot of starter at the bakery, and I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube about how to take care of starter, and a lot of them have titles like no discard, no waste, no feeding. That's total crap. You're going to have waste if you're not careful, although I'll show you how to minimize it. But you have to feed it every day, because if you don't feed it, the yeast in there gets weak and then it doesn't do its job. So you have to feed the starter. Think of it like a little kid. You got to feed it every day or it's going to wither and die. Maybe not quite like that, but you know what I mean. We were a comparatively small artisan bakery, so we weren't doing big, huge volumes, but there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from what we did. We had to have enough starter to make all the product that we needed, but in addition to that, we didn't want to waste a lot of starter. So we always had to find uses for the starter and just not build it up so much that we had waste. So I'm going to show you the worksheet that we did that, but first I'll give you an idea. This is 1 day's worth of bagels. We would proof the bagels overnight, but you can see this whole box is full of bagels that are all hand rolled. There are several videos on how to hand roll bagels. I'll probably cover that in later bagels because we had a special way that we did it. But these are all hand rolled bagels, and it's a whole cabinet full of them. So you need to know how much starter you need to make these bagels, because otherwise you're going to waste a lot of starter. And even on a home scale, you don't want to waste a lot of starter because it's energy and it's ingredients and it's money. So you don't want to waste it. This is our starter buildup chart that we use to decide how much to make. So we would look at the recipes that we were going to make for the next day, add up how much starter we needed, and then the left column is how much starter we needed for the day's worth of baking the next day. So on a small day, the first 2 lines are for home quantities. I've recalculated them. At the bakery, we started at 4 quarts, then went to 6 quarts, 8 quarts, all the way up to 22 quarts, because that's the size of the containers. And that was the most we needed for a busy day. So the first column is how much you need to have for the next day. And then the second 2 columns are how much water and how much flour you had to add in order to build up to the amount that you need. So you had just what you needed, and at the end of the baking day, your starter was worked down to just a little bit. You didn't have to throw anything away. There was no waste. Plus, it's hard to know how to throw starter away anyway. It's kind of gummy and liquidy. You don't want to pour it in the trash. You don't want to pour it down a drain. So the only thing that you build starter up with is flour and water. Don't put milk in, because then you can't let it sit on the counter. Don't put sugar in, because then the yeast goes crazy and it acts in a very unpredictable way. And never, ever, ever put commercial yeast into a homemade starter that you're using like this. Never put commercial yeast in, because it'll take over the whole thing and ruin it. So once you have the starter going, all you add is flour and water. So for this first one, we're going to need 4 cups of starter for tomorrow's bagels that we're going to make on this recipe series. So you would add 1 1/4 cups of water and 3 cups of flour. Just dump it in. Hopefully you got one of those Cambro tubs that we recommend. Just dump it all in, give it a good stir, keep it on the counter overnight. By the next day, it'll be all foamy and ready to go. So this is how you avoid having a bunch of waste. Have a starter buildup chart and reference it. So if you know how much you need, then you know how much to make. And this will save you a lot of wasted starter.
This is part 2 of our video on starter care. Starter care, as you saw in video 1, is just really important, because without proper starter care, the bread doesn't turn out and then it gets thrown out, or worse, gets baked off and served to the customer anyway. So the starter, if you read the directions on the top of this lid, tells you everything that you need to know, but I'm going to go over it anyway. The most important thing is you need to work down the starter to 2 cups. It says 2 cups there, or less, before building it back. So you want to work it down to just a little bit right there. The more you can build it up, the frothier and foamier and healthier it is. So if you can't work the starter down, if you get stuck with like 8 quarts or whatever, and you can't work it down by making croissant dough or cinnamon rolls, or we actually have a bread recipe that's for using up extra starter. So if you plan ahead, you could use up the extra starter, but if you can't use it up by the end of the day, what you need to do is pour it off into another container and put it in the refrigerator. We got the ice bucket for this, but you can see we had 4 quarts. So if we're going to double, at least double 4 quarts, then we're going to be up to 8 quarts. Then the next day we're going to be up to 16 quarts, and before you know it, there's starter all over. So you need to pull excess starter off if there's excess starter. So it reminds you right here, make more dough if you need to work it down more, or pour off and refrigerate. Be sure to at least double the starter volume. More is better. You want to go at least 4 times. You can limp by with doubling it one day, but if you do that 2 or 3 or 4 days, it just makes the starter really lethargic, and then your loaves of bread are only about that tall. They're really thin because there's not strength in the starter. So finish reading this. You want to build it up to the amount on prep sheet, which I will show you the paperwork for the starter. These are the prep sheets over here. This tells you down at the bottom how much starter you need to build to, and the amounts differ depending on what needs to be made. So this is all organized to go forward. So if today is Wednesday, for example, Wednesday right here, you would want to build it up to 10 quarts of starter, whereas on Monday you would only need 6 quarts. So this is all offset. So you're making more starter on Wednesday and Thursday, and that's so that you could make more dough on Thursday and Friday and then bake off more bread on Saturday. So it's all incorporated in. So this is your Bible. You want to refer to this. So there's another video on how to use this prep sheet, but what you want to do is figure out today's starter, and today is actually Monday. So 6 quarts is what we want to build to. So on our needs to be made today sheet down here at the bottom, we're just going to write 6 quarts. So if we're going to build up to 6 quarts, we need to have it worked down at least to 3 quarts. But we worked it all the way down there. So in order to figure out how much to build it up, in order to go to 6 quarts, that's kind of halfway between 4 and 8. So it's better to round up if you don't have the exact amount, because if you round down, then you're going to be short and not be able to make enough dough the next day. So this calls for 6, and we're going to go to 8. And this is the sheet right here for how much to add to build up the starter. Read all this stuff right here, work the starter down to less than 10 ahead. You could use up the extra starter, but if you can't use it up by the end of the day, what you need to do is pour it off into another container and put it in the refrigerator. We got the ice.
This is just a glance of what you can have by using your sourdough starter and building it up correctly. All these yummy bagels, which you can freeze and just pull out as you need them. So check out the next video on making cinnamon rolls, because sourdough cinnamon rolls are really good.